Welcome to MIDI's Innovation Vault podcast. In this episode of Medtech's Next Wave, Innovators from LSI, we're joined by Michelle Turney, CSO, and Tim Jones, CEO of Symphysis Medical. Symphysis is developing a smart drainage device for patients with pleural effusion, allowing them to manage their condition independently at home. Their innovation features a simplified insertion procedure, a one-handed drainage process, and a mobile app for remote monitoring. Despite challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic, Symphysis Medical has made significant progress leveraging strong clinical partnerships and a user-centered design approach. Join us as Michelle and Tim discuss how they are transforming pleural effusion care.
Welcome to the MIDI Innovation Vault podcast, where we'll explore the innovative minds and groundbreaking technologies in the medtech world. I'm your host, Greg Montalbano, the COO of MIDI Medical Product Development. In each episode, we speak with the leaders who are shaping the future of healthcare, learning about their professional journeys, their company's technologies, and challenges they've overcome. And today, I'm excited to welcome Michelle Turney, the CSO, and Tim Jones, the CEO of Symphysis Medical. Symphysis Medical is making important advancements with a unique medtech device for patient care, specifically for those with pleural effusion, which is a condition where too much fluid builds up in the pleural space, which is a thin cavity between the lungs and the chest wall. Michelle and Tim, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Excellent. So to start, could you share a bit about each one of your backgrounds, what led you to co-found Symphysis Medical? And for our listeners, could you also give an overview of Symphysis Medical's technology, the device and its application, and what it's looking to accomplish?
Sure. So my own background is in life sciences. So I would have worked in the pharmaceutical and clinical research area for a number of years. And during that time, I would have gained an increasing interest in the area of medical devices through some part-time study I was doing at the time. And through those studies, I came across a program that's based here in the west of Ireland called BioInnovate, based in the University of Galway. And that's effectively a needs-led innovation program. And it was during that 10-month program that I met Tim. We were put onto a multidisciplinary team looking at interventional pulmonology, allowing us to effectively go into clinical settings, observe procedures, conversations between clinicians and patients in that realm of interventional pulmonology. And at the end of that 10 months, we ultimately came to wanting to address, as you mentioned earlier, pleural effusions. And I guess we can explain the technology that we eventually came up with in a bit, but I'd like Tim to introduce himself.
Yep, so my background is as a business and materials engineering graduate. I went on to get a further degree in medical device innovation that then allowed me to cut my teeth in Medtronic. And that really kind of fueled my excitement in the medical device industry. So with a real draw towards the startup space and being a part of every piece that try to touch every piece of what you develop or what you build, the multinational role wasn't quite a good fit for me, so I wanted to get into that startup realm. And that's kind of, although not absolutely knowing it was going to be building a startup from scratch, that's what drew me towards the BioInnovate program, similar to Michelle, that looking at the needs-led approach, looking at where we can add value, taking my experience on this multidisciplinary team to see where we can drive the next innovation within the industry. So we were very, very fortunate to have clinical immersion in Ireland and in the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and getting that real connection with the patients and the clinicians through that program really drove our passion to want to build Symphysis. And very shortly after that program, we knew what we were going to go after. We knew how we were going to try to tackle it. And from that point on, it was all about building the value proposition, building the team, building out the product, and ensuring that we are developing the correct product based on the the real strong voices of both the clinicians and the patients.
Excellent. So maybe you can give us an overview of the device, its application. I believe it's at-home use, as well.
Yeah, so we've developed Release. It's a smart drainage technology. So it is quite similar to existing technologies that are called indwelling pleural catheters, in that they are placed in the hospital in an outpatient setting. The patient then goes home and they have to drain the fluid that builds up in their chest, as you described, on a frequent basis. That could be every day, every other day, or just a couple of times a week. The existing technology means that the patient heavily relies on either a home health nurse or a family member to help them with that drainage process. And what we wanted to tackle, one of the main areas we wanted to tackle, was the fact that there's such a heavy reliance on others for them in order to do their drainage. So that piece in itself with the current technology can significantly impact people's sense of autonomy, independence, and dignity around having this particular device. And so what we've designed is a user-friendly approach to this technology, so streamlining all the steps required to conduct the drainage, looking at the aesthetic, removing an external tube that's there with external, so again, making it all more streamlined on the body. So a lot of it heavily focused on patient independence. We focus on other areas around simplifying how it's placed in the first instance in the hospital, and ease of removal. There's a remote monitoring aspect to it, but the key part of the core drainage technology is independence.
And that independence piece is becoming clearer and clearer, the importance of offering it. So, I mean, we look at the trends in the market from hospital to home. I mean, that's been driven across the globe, but we see it in very focused papers as well. So patient experience is now becoming something that people are talking about more and trying to understand more. So when we look at this patient cohort, we're working in the palliative care area, and some people have their own idea of what palliative care is, and it's often misunderstood. Palliative care can be years of going through a program to ensure that you're making the most comfortable environment for these patients that are suffering from conditions. Our particular patients typically have a survival of between 3 and 12 months, and they're very active in a lot of instances. So up to about 75% of these patients have a good activity score, and they still garden, they still swim in some instances, they still go out for long walks, and they are in a position where they can have more independence. But with the current technologies, which haven't changed in over 25 years now, they are limited in doing that because they need support in order to treat themselves, or in order to get that treatment in the home environment. But what ours does is really empowers them to have that true independence through being able to manage that treatment holistically and independently with one hand with our device.
So in looking at your device, there's a desktop device, there's IOMT, app control, I believe there's a disposable application, and maybe you could talk about some of the usage ceremony of your device and your application, but also I'm curious, what is the current application, what is currently addressing this issue, and how it seems like, obviously it may be a physician needs to drain that fluid as opposed to being able to do it at home. So maybe walk through the usage ceremony of what you've developed, and maybe tell us, what exists currently in the marketplace to address, the issue of the cavity.
Is it possible to flip those around, Greg, to say kind of this is what currently occurs, and this is how we believe our device addresses it?
Absolutely. Go for it.
So perhaps I can do it on the side of what currently does. So patient would go into the hospital, they'd have severe breathlessness, they'd get a scan, they'd see a buildup of fluid in the chest, and they need to get it drained. So they'd get what's called a thoracentesis or a pleural tap. That fluid would come out, and if there's a relief from their breathlessness, then they know that fluid is causing then that condition, and they know that they have to manage that fluid on an ongoing basis because of the benefit to the patient. So they'll have a sample of that fluid to see, is it potentially malignant, is it cancer related, and they'll get the results of that in a couple of weeks. In that meantime, the patients go away, they see if that fluid recumulates. If it does, then that puts that patient into the realms of what we're looking at with the current device in the market called an indwelling pleural catheter. There's a couple of brands out there, whether it might be Pleurex or Rocket, and then that is inserted into the patient in a day case, so outpatient procedure, takes approximately 45 minutes to an hour, and then they'll drain afterwards. The nurse will show them how to do it, and then they'll go home, and then they'll continue to drain on a regular basis at home. That regularity of the drainage will be agreed between the clinician and the patient, depending on how well they are, how able they are to do it with the supports they have at home, whether it's a loved one and a public health nurse or just a loved one. And that might be every day, every other day, or just on symptom relief. And then over a period of time, that might be anything up to 12 months. That catheter might be for the entire period of the rest of their lives, or it may come out earlier because that fluid buildup has resolved. They go back into the hospital, and Michelle alluded to earlier, that's the way that it then gets taken out is quite difficult with the current technology. It needs to be dissected. It's about a 30-minute procedure in order to get that catheter out, and then they'd be able to go home maybe for a month or two without needing to manage that condition.
Okay. So
then from our side of things, how we're kind of addressing it.
Yeah, so I suppose there's some pain points in that pathway along the way. The first one probably being how the existing technology is inserted. So at the moment it requires 2 incisions and a tunnel that needs to be performed under the skin around where the tube enters the chest cavity. And that, from our feedback through the BioInnovate program and since with clinicians, can be the trickiest part of the procedure. So not necessarily accessing the chest cavity, which is the most invasive bit, but it's actually to create the tunnel, and that tunnel is being created to effectively secure that external portion of the tube. How we have changed that up is we just require 1 incision, and then we just require a little pocket to be created under the skin into which our patented technology, or we call it our anchor, just basically effectively twists into that pocket, and it takes quite a few steps out of creating that securement mechanism of that tunnel, and makes it a lot simpler. And so we don't necessarily change the access to the chest cavity. All of that remains the same, but it's the securement element that can protract the procedure itself that we've made a lot simpler. And clinicians really seem to like that change because, you know, new training fellows being trained up, it hugely simplifies that. And it's that anchor component that we use via 1 incision that is effectively the platform to allow not only how streamlined it looks on the body and have a port as opposed to a tube, but it's the basis upon which then our user-friendly drainage procedure was designed for when the patient goes home. So in both instances, the existing technology and ours are both placed in the hospital, and then in both instances, patients go home and drain. But what we've tackled is making that insertion procedure simpler, and then when the patient goes home, making that drainage procedure also simpler for that user by allowing them not so much to rely on a care or a health professional to come to their home and be able to do it whenever they feel like, and not depend on another person, because the timeliness of being able to train is very important to their quality of life, that as soon as they feel breathless or chest pain, that they can just do it themselves and not wait for whenever their health nurse is scheduled to come or the family member is finishing up work. And then I would say, outside of the insertion procedure, the drainage procedure in the home, the next key thing that differentiates us is probably our app. In the first instance, it's there to coach the patient at home, allows them to streamline how they log their symptoms. But the future iterations of it will hugely streamline what's happening in the hospital in terms of viewing patients on a population basis, aggregating the data, potentially looking at it from a research point of view to understand pleural effusions a little bit more, and then down the line to streamline the whole patient pathway as it comes to distribution and supplies and everything like that.
And we know already through a couple of studies how it really does have the potential to keep patients out of the hospital. So through the communication piece, whether it's an image that they take or it's something that they can look at with the frequently asked questions or reminder videos, it gives them the comfort to be able to do what they want, but also that communication piece to the team in the hospital has the opportunity then to rather than go into the hospital, maybe drive for 4 hours, have a quick meeting with the clinician or the nurse for 5-10 minutes, just to be told that everything's okay, they have an ability to do that remotely. And we've seen that a number of times with the studies that we've had, that we have managed to keep them out of the hospital on a number of occasions. And that's just with our first minimum viable product. So we are working on the second generation of that, taking back the feedback from the first 2 studies and developing something that will be improved upon again.
Yeah, it sounds like there's quite a bit of competitive differentiation that you're offering the medical community in order to manage conditions like pleural effusion, which again can have a lot of patient monitoring and visits currently to the hospital to treat and adjust their treatments. So how has the medical community responded to Symphysis Medical's approach so far, and what steps are you taking to support the integration of your technology into, you know, the various settings you're looking to have your product live in?
That's been one of the most rewarding parts of our journey to date, is that response from the medical community. So we engaged, well, we were fortunate to engage with the hospital groups from a very early stage. So building those relationships with the hospitals here in Galway University Hospital, Cork University Hospital, but also out in the US in the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, really enabled us to have that support from an early stage, where we built something meaningful that we wanted to continue to say that this is a technology that we as a group believe that we can develop, and we wanted to bring the clinicians along as we started to articulate what that looked like, what the real value proposition was, work with them to understand how we give the most benefit to them as clinicians for this condition. And through that process, we've continued to grow those relationships. And through the relationships that we've grown with them, that's then filtered into their colleagues across other top centres. And probably one good example would be MD Anderson. So we would have gone to a conference in New Orleans called CHEST back in 2019, where we got the opportunity to tell a group of key opinion leaders about what we're trying to do, and that we'd love to have a further conversation with a wider group to say, well, if we can do this, we want to be a part of that. We want to help out. What do you want us to do? So then every conference then from that point on, we get the opportunity to develop those conversations, understand where the device should go, and how we can be a part of the conversation overall. So not just about indwelling pleural catheters, but what we're developing. Can we learn more from you guys about how we add value to pleural disease management? And we've built an incredible network right away across from the US to Australia, UK, Ireland, and various places along the way. And it's a relationship that we cherish with many of these key opinion leaders.
Excellent. So let's shift gears. So let's talk about building and scaling a medtech company and looking towards the future. Ultimately, that brings its own unique challenges. So could you walk us through some of your earliest, biggest hurdles in Symphysis Medical that you faced, and whether it's related to regulatory, securing funding, developing the technology and the product itself? What were some of your biggest challenges to date?
Maybe start that one. How long have we got this?
I would say the first biggest challenge that comes to mind was probably COVID, because we were trying to do 2 core activities at that time, which was raise money and do our preclinical testing, and trying to do that remotely. So, at that point, investors were trying to get to grips with they themselves trying to assess companies fully remotely. It had its upsides in that you could obviously meet more people. You didn't have to be on the road to go and meet them, but it was hard to make that connection that you would in a face-to-face instance. So that was difficult for sure. And yeah, when it comes to the we did a number of studies remotely. So setting up the Teams or the Zoom in the lab with our colleagues over in Italy and trying to coordinate things was difficult. It's definitely hard when there's key tests and assessments going on of your product and you can't be there to either see the results or help them along the way, because obviously, as you say, we're the most familiar with the device, but they did a super job and we got through it. It extends timelines. There's an adjustment to a new way of doing things. So for me, they're the two key things that kind of
and with that piece as well, I'll just add to that because that's our preclinical partner in Rome. So we would have conducted maybe 4 studies with them, I think, before COVID. So we were able to really build a strong relationship with them. And that's what we're all about in Symphysis, is that we want to work with partners that we can really build something and a trust and a real understanding of what we're trying to do. So we try to get people bought into what we're doing. We try to work with the best. And we've been very fortunate with that. So that foundation that we built with this particular CRO in Rome was sufficient enough for them to then be able to do that remotely and ultimately be successful in those studies. And that's across all of the stuff. We've had challenges like every other company, I'd imagine, when we start looking at manufacturing, finding the right partner, and we've gone through challenges with previous partners, and we've then found the right one for us, and we've built really strongly off that to know that now this is who we're going to be successful with. So that early assessment of working with the right people is key. Working with the right organizations is key. Is it the right fit for us? Are we the right fit for them? And every single time that we get on a call with somebody new, we sell ourselves. We are pitching on what we're doing. Although they're going to be our suppliers and we're paying them, it's really important for us to get across what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to build in Symphysis. And that goes for people as well. So when we talk about the commercial side of things, we want to partner ourselves with the right people, learn from the right consultants originally, and then when we have the opportunity to bring the right people in who are going to be able to map out what that commercial plan looks like. So originally, we have a plan like everybody else. This is your total addressable market, serviceable addressable, serviceable obtainable. This is based off research, desk-based. Now, how do we make this real? So how do we get the information that we are going to build a company off and be able to stand over those figures with our investors? And then how do you validate that with the right people when you bring them in? So that's where we're at now. We're very much in the key activity of articulating our launch in the US, how we get the hospitals, but it's what that customer acquisition looks like after that, how we repeat those sales, how many people need to be on the ground, what's our best case scenario for COGS, worst case scenario for COGS, ASPs, actual selling prices, and making sure that we have a fully mapped out model, again, that we can stand over, that we believe that we can build this company from.
Excellent. Yeah, and again, strategic partnerships really play that pivotal role, especially for emerging medtech companies, and between Mayo and other groups you have, and those collaborations and those partnerships can really allow you to succeed, and that's important that you're properly integrating them. That's excellent. So just talking about, I know you talked about receiving feedback from clinicians. What feedback have you received from patients relative to the application, and how has that shaped, the user interface, the graphical user interface, the physical design as you're going through the industrial design usability of the product? And were there any surprising insights from patients that led to key improvements or adjustments along the way of the actual device, its user interface, its app, and others?
Yeah, so the feedback we've gotten from the patient perspective has kind of been twofold. So we would have gotten that initial feedback from like real patients with actual indwelling pleural catheters in place in BioInnovate when we were first assessing the need. So that helped us to inform what our actual need needed to be in that, like what are the pain points with the current catheters. And actually what we saw a lot of the patients were very appreciative of the existing technology because it allowed them to go home. And that was the key bit, was that they wanted to go home. And so they were quite grateful for that. But then I suppose there'd be hints of, well, there's this tube and I can't really sleep on that side. And then there's all this dressing and I need, my husband and I'm waiting for him to come home. So then, although they would always say they're quite grateful, you could then see there was an opportunity to make this much better. And then, we come up with our initial concepts and design. And I suppose how we've managed to get more feedback from that end user perspective is as you talked about partnership, is we've teamed up with a group and an institute over in the UK that focus very much on end user experiences, largely for consumer products. And we were actually one of their first medical device partnerships. But we always felt like when we were developing something for the home that we wanted to be more home-like and consumer-like than clinical. And so obviously addressing the clinical need and once that's all covered, trying to go that little bit further in terms of how it's going to look in the home. They're draining fluid, but do they need to see the fluid? Not really. So trying to, as we said earlier, streamline all the steps. So we worked with that institute. We've done 3 studies now, so usability studies with that institute in the UK. Using representatives of the patient population. So they're typically over 65. We try to get people with comorbid conditions, visual impairments, dexterity impairments, and really challenge the use of our device with people that are in the real world going to have their own challenges with other things that are going on, and see if what we are saying we wanted to do actually pans out. So that one-handed drainage step, for instance, how they feel about the look. So we've done 3 of those studies and they have informed us. They've resulted in design updates and changes. We probably have 1 more to do, which will be our summative usability study. But we're going, I think, above and beyond the regulatory requirement when it comes to usability studies by working with this particular partner and trying to get more feedback than the baseline expectations, because we genuinely want it to be a truly user-friendly product, not just from the steps, but how it looks and feels in the home as well.
And those human factor evaluation kind of guidelines from the FDA really does give a broad variation in what you could deliver. So Michelle just said, we go above and beyond. Some people would have a very basic setup in maybe a hotel or in a lab, and that's sufficient for the technology. With us, we just had an opportunity to partner with people who are world leaders in this kind of assessment. They have a simulated environment. There's a 2-way mirror. We have a team behind there, and we can really look at how these people are interacting with the device. And gain insights into things that they might have on the initial studies had those kind of mishaps with, or and that's where the device tweaks because they did this by accident, or they picked up this thing assuming it was one of the things that they should be doing, and then that's how we change the design, the look, the color, or whatever it is that the feedback clearly indicates from that. And then we go above and beyond again, because we might just need to look at the worst case scenario. If a patient independently can use this and they can go through all the steps, then that's the information for the FDA, and great, that will go through. But we had an opportunity to even include a carer cohort. And in those, you see wonderful observations because there were 3 different types of carer. One was a husband and wife, one was a mother and daughter, and one was a friend of a friend. And you see how they're interacting, and these are real world interactions that we will see with our device. So the insights that we can gain from that are invaluable, and knowing that we are working with a group that we really trust and really we really are enriched by their involvement in this program and the output and the quality of the output of the data that we get from it. We think that we're really setting ourselves up for success for the future.
Excellent. So let's talk about capital raising. So, excuse me, raising capital is, essential. It's part and parcel to being a medtech startup, and so it seems like a never-ending process as you're going towards the ultimate goals. So, can you share with us some of your experiences with fundraising for Symphysis, and any specific challenges or lessons that you can share with the listening audience that you've learned throughout your process?
Yeah, and saying that it's a never-ending process, it certainly is. It's a continual part of everyday life at this company. So when we look at how we started, we were very fortunate to get non-dilutive grant funding to prove out our technology. That enabled us then to spend time building value proposition and showing how we can grow the company and create something that could be sustainable in the long term. Through that process and through a very, very strong network within the west of Ireland here in Galway particularly, we'd be able to, our name would have got out there. So then we had some investors contacting us to say, we like what you guys are doing. We've got a pitch event at this time. Do you want to get involved? And we're also going out with every angle that we can to try and find other high net worths, angel groups initially, any other grant funding that might be out there. So a significant amount of work to do that. But we were fortunate enough that a group that approached us initially were the right ones for us. So we got our 1.925 million back in December 2021. And since then, we've had strong support from that group. We've had buy-in from new high net worths. And we're now, we've just closed a 2.2 million bridge fund, and we're looking to close a further 4.3 million by the end of this year, of which about 2.5 million is allocated. So the interest is continuing to come through our current investors, our expansive network when we got the opportunity to highlight what we're doing and what that journey looks like and our chances of success. And through associations with certain investors, associations with certain stakeholders, perhaps it might be the manufacturing partner that we are working with, the world class as well. We've got the National Innovation Centre for Aging, world class. We're working with the likes of MD Anderson and the Mayo Clinic, and those things all come together to say, this is a real company that we believe can be successful and is something that we can put our money into. So that's all on the positive side. But on the real side, then, how you actually convert that cash, it's through a grueling process of stakeholder management. And we've, like everybody else, we've had our ups and downs. We've taken a little bit longer to bring in money due to the capital markets, being really challenged over the last couple of years. But the strength of what we're building, the core team that we have, the belief in the product from the clinicians, ultimately keeps on getting us to that next stage.
Very good. So as you've grown, as your organization has grown, what are some of your next challenges you're facing? How are you preparing for those future challenges as you continue to move the ball forward and ultimately scale your technology and your commercialization path as well as regulatory?
Yeah, well, a constant challenge, again, similar to funding, as resources. So, and time to get in those resources and get the right resources is always ongoing, I would say. So we would love, obviously, infinite people on our team, but it's just not the case right now. So, yeah, that's kind of one thing that we've gone through. This year was a a very busy year when it came to hiring, which is great. And we've got some really key new people and new positions into the company. But as we ramp up towards commercialization in 2026, and next year is going to be another key year. And so we do try to dedicate quite a lot of effort and energy into getting the right people, because we can see how well, when the team performs well, you know, everything, that doesn't mean you don't have any challenges, but you work through your challenges more effectively, I think. And then the other, not necessarily a challenge, but obviously it's just a key milestone for us is our submission to the FDA next year. So you know, we've met with the FDA a couple of times already through their pre-submission mechanism, and we're currently planning our third engagement with them. And we've seen great value in de-risking our regulatory. We feel we're de-risking our regulatory pathway by having those engagements with them, bringing them along on the journey with us. So showing them how the device has matured and iterated over time, how we've taken on feedback from them in terms of how we are conducting our preclinical assessments, our usability assessments. So that's, again, another, not something that's required, but we see the benefit in doing. And obviously that kind of, you know, you have to prepare for that, take on whatever feedback. Maybe there's a slight change to your plans, which sometimes just takes a while to come around to, but inevitably you can understand that by taking on any feedback you get from the FDA is only going to help you in the long run. So hopefully it will pay us dividends on the other end, having had those engagements with them. But I think, yeah, I think looking forward, and as just said, investment continues to be something we continually look at. We're now trying to close our C+ round by the end of this year, and then probably likely quite soon after that just starting for Series A as well. So it'll be kind of, I hate to stress Tim out too much, but that's the way it is right now. You know, there used to be a defined time you need to put aside to raise a round, and then, you know, there's a lull, but just doesn't seem like those lulls are there anymore.
Yeah. And on top of the recruitment, you know, I think everyone's in the same boat, that the markets are kind of a little Spartan at the moment, and finding the right people takes time. And we are absolutely willing to make sure we spend that extra time to get the right people. So we're not panicking to rush the hires, get them in and, you know, try and get this all done ASAP. We're waiting to find the right people to then fold them into the business. And what I mean by folding them into the business is to ensure that we do build a team with clear structure, roles, responsibilities. We spend time on it and ensure that everybody knows what they need to be doing and are bought into that continued vision of the company. So although we're only a team of 12 here now in Ireland and 1 in the US, it's still key that we stay on top of that, and we build an environment and a culture that everyone is really invigorated to be inside.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, you know, startups, obviously their technology and their application needs to be robust, but they really are their team. They are their people, and having that spirit, energy, persistence, and courage is really what makes a company. And you know, I certainly can sense that with you guys. So finally, as MedTech founders, what single advice, or, you know, it could be plural, but what would you give advice aspiring entrepreneurs who would want to make an impact in our challenging but rewarding industry that we all live in?
For me, and this is key to me on an everyday basis. For me, it's ensuring that we set up things to enjoy the journey, because I don't think, I know from me personally, if I was only going after the destination, I would never get there. So it's important that what we set up is meaningful, energizes me, and it's something that I look forward to on an ongoing basis. And that's why we set up partners that we want to what we look forward to. When we get on a team meeting on a Monday and we're talking to Philips, LSI up in Letterkenny that are doing the manufacture of our device, they're a great team, and our team look forward to talking to them. The clinicians, we've got discussions with them, and we might have a call next week. Can't wait to talk to them. So setting the business up in a way that every week you've got something to look forward to. And you are really bolstered and enriched by those conversations of what we're trying to build. And never lose sight of this is a long journey, and it's not about just getting to an endpoint, because there's no real endpoint here. What we are delivering is something to continually improve things within pleural disease management. So it's not, we have a vision of what we can do as a company and what we'll be able to put in our pipeline, how we'll be able to support those clinicians, but that's many, many years away. And we've got so much to fill that gap. It's ensuring that we fill that with all the right things that we can.
That's excellent advice, and I really appreciate that perspective of making progress. Certainly, we all want perfection, but it's really progress, not necessarily perfection, as we move forward, because there's many different pivots and challenges and stumbling blocks that we hit along the way as we try and move that ball forward, and that's an excellent perspective. So, with that said, Michelle and Tim, thank you for taking the time to share your journey and your insights with our audience. And it's been enlightening to learn about Symphysis Medical and the work that you're doing to improve patient care.
Thanks very much, Greg.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. So that brings us to the close of this episode of MIDI Innovation Vault Podcast. A big thank you to Michelle and Tim for sharing Symphysis Medical's story and their perspectives on advancing treatment for pleural effusion. So we welcome this conversation, provided valuable insights into the challenges and breakthroughs in medtech, and be sure to stay tuned for more conversations with leaders in the field. And don't forget to follow MIDI on social media for updates. Michelle, Tim, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of MIDI's Innovation Vault Podcast, Medtech's Next Wave, Innovators from LSI. We hope you enjoyed hearing about Symphysis Medical's innovative approach to patient care. Remember to subscribe to the MIDI Innovation Vault and stay tuned for more episodes of Medtech's Next Wave, Innovators from LSI, where we continue to bring you the latest innovations and thought leaders from across the medical technology industry. Until next time, keep innovating and pushing the boundaries of what's possible in healthcare.